Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 299, almost that big 300. We are covering Gaudium et Spes 7-8, and these paragraphs are on the contrast between progress and immoral actions. That's what it says in the summary on the reading plan. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we spoke about how science has become the dominant form of knowledge and the growth of migration. Today, we're going to continue the section Introductory Statement on Men in the Modern World. And the summary is we'll need to look at how modern cultural situations affect us, how it affects young people, how it affects religion, things like that. So, moving straight into paragraph 7. Paragraph 7 has two subparagraphs. A is about young people and how they struggle to accept the values that are handed down, the traditional values in that sense. And B is about the situation and how our cultural situation affects the practice of religion. So let's move on to 7a. A change in attitudes and in human structures frequently calls accepted values into question, especially among young people, who have grown impatient on more than one occasion and indeed become rebels in their own distress. Aware of their own influence in the life of society, they want a part in it sooner. This frequently causes parents and educators to experience greater difficulties day by day in discharging their tasks. The institutions, laws, and modes of thinking and feeling, as handed down from previous generations, do not always seem to be well adapted to the contemporary state of affairs. Hence arise an upheaval in the manner and even the norms of behavior. In the 21st century, I think most of us can see a lot of these difficulties in accepting values. For a long time, values are more accepted just because these are what our values have been for 500 years. These are our cultural values. These are our traditional values. That argument alone no longer works. And so we need to find ways to present the values, the true values, in ways that young people are going to accept, that young people will see the truth in those values. Because the values you present as Christians are objective values that are beautiful, that are wonderful, that, if presented right, people will want. And young people also want to be in charge like an adult. But we have a challenge in society. As society has developed more and more, it takes longer and longer until you're ready to be an adult. In an agricultural society, it makes a lot of sense for a man and wife to get married at 18 and go on and do perfectly fine. That becomes difficult if both of you are going to go and do bachelor's, then master's, and doctoral degrees or anything like that. I know my own family, going back at least to over 100 years here, tended to get married later because we all did university degrees first. And that's much more common today than it was in my grandparents' and great-grandparents' generation. So we need to look how to present the values anew to young people. This goes back to this idea we had a few days ago. We talked about in a language appropriate to each generation. We need to present the truth, present the values, present Jesus. So moving on to 7b, it talks about how the situations of the world affect the practice of religion. Let's read it. B, finally, these new conditions have their impact on religion. On the one hand, a more critical ability to distinguish religion from a magical view of the world and from superstitions will still circulate, purifies it, and exacts day by day a more personal and explicit adherence to faith. As a result, many persons are achieving a more vivid sense of God. On the other hand, growing numbers of people are abandoning religion and practice. Unlike former days, the denial of God or of religion, or the abandonment of them, are no longer unusual individual occurrences. For today it is not rare for such things to be presented as requirements of scientific progress, or of a certain new humanism. In numerous places, these views are voiced not only in the teachings of the philosophers, but on every side they influence literature, the arts, the interpretation of humanities, and of history and of civil laws themselves. As a consequence, many people are shaken. I kind of slipped there and started saying humorism instead of humanism. It is kind of humorous sometimes to think of how atheism goes about, but that's not the point here. Religion and our practice of religion doesn't exist in a vacuum. Religion is not just out there, that other aspect of life, just our spiritual life. No, religion is practiced in the reality of the world we live in. And so issues here, like we're talking about how they have different views, have both good and bad movements. The first one that's noted here is good. It notes how it's kind of separated from these superstitions, from these magical things, which purifies religion, which makes us more able to contact God and not just treat God as some lesser thing, as some demiurge that we can control by our magical skill. And helps us see God for who he is. On the other hand, we have a lot of denial of God today. It's much more common today, and sometimes it's put forward as this combination with modern progress. But it's not required. We have plenty of major scientists today who are still believing Christians, and some who are still believing of other religions. I'm not sure of the numbers exactly, but I've seen a few. One quote that's attributed to Werner Heisenberg, although I'm not 100% sure if he said it, it's uncertain. You either get that joke or you don't. If you know who Heisenberg is, you'll get the joke. Anyway, so Werner Heisenberg, supposedly, it's like is said to have said, the first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And I think there is some truth to that. Sometimes we think of God as just filling out what we don't know, and then we know a few things. We're like, oh, God resolves that. But as you look for more and more, we realize there needs to be something beyond, something above, something outside of these powers, and that's where we can see God. God is not just another power in this universe. Let's move on to paragraph 8. It has 5 subparagraphs. A and B are about we can get caught up in the detail and forget the big picture. And C, D is about discord in the family and between groups. So let's begin. A, this development coming so rapidly and often in a disorderly fashion, combined with keener awareness itself of the inequalities in the world, begin or intensify contradictions and imbalances. B, within the individual person, there develops rather frequently an imbalance between an intellect, which is modern and practical matters, and a theoretical system of thought which can neither master the sum total of its ideas, nor arrange them adequately into a synthesis. Likewise, an imbalance arises between a concern for practicality and efficiency and the demands of moral conscience. Also, very often, between the conditions of collective existence and the requisites of personal thought and even of contemplation. At length, there develops an imbalance between specialized human activity and a comprehensive view of reality. The first thing these 2 subparagraphs note is this rapid pace can confuse us. We can get confused. And then it has an extensive part in 8b here on the idea how we get very focused and lose sight of the bigger picture. Where we get so focused on the specifics that we lose sight. One of the challenges of the modern world is to know the things. There's just so much to know. So much more that we know as a collective of humanity today than 200 years ago. And because we know all that, you can't be an expert in everything. And one of the challenges can be, especially in academia, is the idea is to focus. You get this super expert in this one very particular thing. And it's good for your career in that sense. But the challenge is sometimes then it's difficult to synthesize it or to put it into context. Or sometimes you look at the practical and the efficient and forget about that. What does it mean? What's the wider perspective? Those kind of questions, which are valuable for knowledge. And with all these ideas, hopefully we don't lose sight with the specialization. And specialization is in itself good, but we can lose sight of the wider picture. Now, C to E, subparagraphs here, talk about discord in the family and between groups. Let's read them. C, as for the family, discord results from population, economic, and social pressures, or from difficulties which arise between succeeding generations, or from new social relationships between men and women. D, differences crop up too between race and between various kinds of social orders, between wealthy nations and those who are less influential or are needy. Finally, between international institutions born of the popular desire for peace and the ambition to propagate one's own ideology, as well as collective greeds existing in nations or other groups. E, what results is mutual distrust, enmities, conflicts, and hardships. Of such is man at once the cause and the victim. Our modern family is much more divided, even going back 60 years to Vatican II. We think of it today, we're talking about divorce and all those things. That's part of it. But even things like moving across the country. I think of how much different my own childhood would have been had my grandparents lived close. They both lived, the closest ones lived a 12-hour drive away from where I grew up. So I didn't see them all the time. I didn't have a wider family to connect with. I see it today with some of my nieces and nephews. Well, all of my nieces and nephews have at least one set of grandparents close by. Some have both. That they have a very different childhood. They have something that I didn't have, and that's good. And one of the challenges we have in our modern society is this kind of division in the family like that can be a challenge. Both the morally problematic one, like divorce and things like that, and the one where it's just people seeking jobs and things. And we can also have discord between groups, between the wealthy and the poor, between different races, things like that. That's a challenge. We still have a lot of tension here in the 21st century. Fortunately, I think it's a little less violent than the past, but it's still there. The tension is still there. And finally, we still have the issue of distrust here. So, thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you could donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow we'll continue with the next paragraph of Gaudium Spes. That's paragraph 9 on people want safety worthy of man. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on this podcast, with things like a playlist for individual documents and a reading plan.